I would like to remind everyone that not so long ago, Disney Marvel Studios was acknowledging all of their past mistakes. And they also claimed to be making efforts to fix their very obvious creative issues. Now, the biggest thing to come out of all of this is that they said they were going to focus on quality over quantity for the first time in the history of this studio. Now, I've yet to see any physical signs that changes are in fact happening when it comes to Marvel content. In fact, it kind of feels like business as usual because the quality of their product hasn't exactly skyrocketed. That being said, the Fantastic Four reboot looks to be a fresh start for the MCU. So the question is, can they follow through on their promise to be better? Let's discuss. Our content sucks. Our content sucks.
I watch so you don't have to.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
Now, I'm not going to lie to you. Going to see an MCU movie over the past 5 or 6 years has been the cinematic equivalent of getting a root canal 4 or 5 times a year. Meaning that there's absolutely nothing pleasant about it, and we know exactly how we got here. By willingly eating shit for years.
I understood that reference.
That being said, all I'm really asking of the MCU, or from any movie for that matter, is to dare to be different. When I go to a theater and I pay my hard-earned money to watch something, I want that film to show me something that I've never seen before. Because I have no interest in seeing the same tired, recycled formula over and over again. That's not filmmaking, and it's not the type of storytelling that appeals to me personally. I know that there is so much potential from Marvel. From a story perspective, from a character perspective, and this is why it's annoying as to me to see them waste all that potential by creating mostly corporate slop. And corporate slop is the byproduct of a studio who does not allow artists and filmmakers to have a vision. Marvel under Disney has never been interested in hiring creatives who have a unique vision. They prefer hired hands who they can control and manipulate into making the movie that they want made.
It's true.
And we have numerous examples of people within the industry confirming this. How many artists have come out recently and said how unfulfilling it is to work on an MCU project? This is Marvel's biggest problem. This is exactly the type of strategy that they need to get away from if they ever plan to save this franchise. Because at some point you won't be able to rely on cameos and nostalgia to sell tickets anymore. At some point you are going to have to figure out how to tell stories again, and then you are going to have to convince the audience that you are capable of doing so. And much to my surprise, the director of the upcoming Fantastic Four reboot is at least trying to deliver on that promise. Now, as with anything that has to do with Marvel, we have to take this with a massive grain of salt, especially if we consider their recent track record. Because it's one thing to say these things and another thing altogether to actually follow through on them.
Talk is cheap, motherfucker!
But in a recent interview with Empire, the Fantastic Four is described as a 60s space race movie shot with miniatures, practical sets, and vintage lenses. Did I just hear an MCU director advocating for a form of filmmaking that doesn't involve an abundance of CGI and green screens? Now, of course, we know that CGI is going to be used in this movie because they're never going to get completely away from that. But even if they decided to cut back on its usage, that is a massive win for audience members who have standards. I don't give a what year you were born in and what movies you grew up watching. It is an undeniable fact that practical effects age 1,000 times better than CGI ever will. Especially Marvel's typical CGI. To hear that they may have actually put those resources into making this film feel more real and organic is absolutely a step in the right direction. Even bad practical effects age well because there is a certain level of charm to them. There is absolutely nothing charming about floating kid heads talking to Thor.
What the hell am I looking at? When does this happen in the movie?
Also, vintage lenses instead of digital lenses, potentially? That's going to go a long way to making this feel like a real film if they do it the right way. He continued, "I really wanted it to feel like it was made in 1965. The way Stanley Kubrick would have made it within reason." Just the fact that he added "within reason" to the end of that tells me one of two things. Either one, he doesn't want to fully open up those comparisons because he knows there is no way in hell he could ever replicate what Stanley Kubrick does behind the camera. Or this is just another talking point to make people think that they are going to see something different in this movie, when in actuality they are not.
Why do these things always happen to me?
I guess we'll have to wait until July to find out, but here's what I do know. If they could capture a fraction of what Stanley Kubrick as a filmmaker brought to the table, then they might be onto something. But you should definitely tread lightly when bringing up one of the all-time greatest filmmakers in relation to your film. Because you see, those types of statements only increase expectations. And if there's one thing that we know about modern MCU movies, is that the quality rarely lives up to the hype. How many times have we heard that the next MCU movie is going to be the best MCU movie yet? It's rarely ever true. In fact, it's never true. And it does create a boy who cried wolf situation where it's hard to take any praise or statements like this seriously.
I don't believe you.
At the end of the day, I do like what I'm hearing here, and I do hope that the film is able to live up to it. Am I confident that it will be able to do that? Absolutely not. And that's mostly because I've been burned many times before by this creatively bankrupt studio. But on paper, in theory, turning a Fantastic Four movie into a vintage-looking space race movie inspired by Stanley Kubrick does sound like an intriguing proposition. I mean, 2001 Space Odyssey mixed with Marvel superheroes, that does have potential. Do I expect the Fantastic Four film to have deep, meaningful messages and themes contained within it like a Stanley Kubrick film? No, because most modern filmmakers do not have the patience, talent, or attention to detail to make that happen. But visually, if they can capture some of that magic, it could go a long way to making this MCU film not feel like the uninspired schlock we usually get from this brand. Now, if only they could find a way to recast this film this late in the game, we might actually be getting somewhere.
Y'all be cool. Nah.